my name is Beck. Welcome to my February wrap up or my February recent reads. I've read about 4 to 5 books in the month of February, so now I'm going to talk about all of them. This video, as usual, is going to be spoiler free. And also any reviews and relevant videos I will link down below in the description so that they're really easy to find. But the first book that I have a review for and that I finished in February is Small Favor by Jim Butcher. This is the 10th book in the Dresden Files. So this follows Harry Dresden, who is a wizard detective. He's a consultant who works with the police and he solves supernatural murders. So this urban fantasy has quickly become one of my favorites ever, just because of the tone of Dresden's characterization, how things are consistent as well. It's not just everything happens in one book and that's enclosed. There are often ripple effects that occur later. There are side characters that are introduced and seem kind of 2D, but then you get to explore them more in later books as ripple effects happen and you realize that they have more depth to them than you initially thought they did. And so I really like the plot twists. I love how humorous this is. I obviously can't say too much about this book because it's the 10th in a series, but my review does spoilers and spoiler free, and the start is spoiler free. So if you want to know more about this, because it's now been a little while since I've read it, I have obviously more fresher thoughts in that review, and it won't spoil you because the first section won't spoil you. I've made sure to make that very clear. So I really enjoyed this, but it wasn't my favorite so far in the series, but this series tends to clock at least a 4 to 5 stars from me anyway, and true to form, this clocked a 4.5 stars out of 5, and I loved it for its humor and its themes of family and grief and resilience and loyalty. All things in a book that are bound to tug at my heartstrings, and this book did make me cry a little bit as well. So high hopes for this series. I can't wait to continue. However, I am reading them in tandem with my partner and he has not had time to start the next book yet. So I don't know when I'm going to start the next book and I'm itching to do it. So hopefully soon, but we'll see. Next up, I downloaded another audiobook and I've wanted to read more sci-fi this year, and I kind of tried to tick that box off with listening to this audiobook, and that is the first in Martha Wells' series called All Systems Red, the Murderbot Diaries. This follows a character who is part human, I think, part cyborg, and their gender is not specified, although the narrator is male, so I thought about them as male, but they use the pronouns they, so that's how I'm going to refer to them. So Murderbot is this character who is on a spaceship. You don't really know what is going on, except they like watching this long-standing sitcom and they don't really want to do the murder thing, but obviously circumstances arise. It is a very short book, it's a novella, so I don't want to spoil anything, and if I talk about it more then I will, but I liked the crew that we were introduced to. I found that things moved fairly slowly for the first 2/3 and then really breakneck in the last section, and I wanted a little bit more time to build the action into the characters. So we got a lot of stuff all at once with the build up, and I just wish that was spread out a little bit more interspersed with action, because when it was the action I was hooked, but the first little bit I found okay and enjoyable, and then the ending I found, ooh, I want to continue reading this, I am intrigued. So it clocked about a 3.5 stars for me. I wanted to give it 4 or 4.5, but it was enjoyable but not amazing, and I think the hype has potentially ruined this a little bit for me, just because I've seen people saying how good it is, and I think I need to chill on my expectations, because if it was 3 out of 5 for the first book, then I imagine that's going to be a pretty similar arc for the rest of the series. So I think this is a sci-fi novella series on audio that I'm really going to enjoy, but it's not going to be a new favourite. But I do plan on continuing it, so 3.5 stars isn't really a bad rating, honestly. And then after I finished Murderbot Diaries, I picked up a book on Valentine's Day, and I pretty much continued reading it and then finished it on that same weekend, and that is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This has become one of my new favourite books ever. I gave this 5 stars, if you couldn't tell. Romance is very much outside my genre, but when they're written in this way with a humorous tone, with a queer main character, with friends who aren't toxic, I'm obviously going to fall in love with it. This follows Alex. He is the son of the next politician that is running for president, and while his mum is doing this, he obviously has a lot of high expectations of himself because he wants to get into politics, into the US Senate. And then he also meets this guy Henry, who is the first prince of the United Kingdom, and so he's from the royal family in the UK. It's a lot to wrap my head around politically, but the story and the characters were delightful, and I loved the interactions. I loved the understanding when it came to the queer characters in here. There's not just one, but I loved it. I just enjoyed the romance so much. This is a bit sexy, so if you're not more into explicit scenes, it does go into detail, but not overly into detail, so you can kind of get a gist of what's going on, but without getting into the nitty-gritty, if that makes sense. It's a romance that I adored, and I've had several friends rave to me about how good it is, and when they picked it up they didn't stop reading, and I was kind of like a little bit hesitant because I really hoped that was what was going to happen with me, and sure enough it did, and now this has become one of my favorites ever. So I'm really happy that I read this. I read it on Valentine's Day for a reason, because I wanted it to have that romantic mood, and it really did stick. So I can't wait to reread this in the future. It is definitely one of my favorites of 2021, and I'm so happy that I loved this. And then after that I ended up reading Wonderland by Juno Dawson. This is a book about a character set in the United Kingdom, and her name is Alice, hence Wonderland. She's a trans woman, she's attending high school, she's a bit rebellious, she's been in and out of drugs in her past, and she's trying to get a handle on her mental health while going to this new school and while experiencing transphobia. And this is a very deep dive into Alex's thought process, her psychosis. Obviously with Alice in Wonderland that's an associated theme, and it follows Alice after this girl named Bunny who has disappeared. People think she's been kidnapped or murdered, and there's a party called Wonderland which Bunny apparently got an invitation for, so Alice is off to find this party that's quite mysterious and you don't know the location of, and so she's going there to find Bunny and hopefully, I don't know, solve her murder. There was a little romantic love story going on in here, and there was also some explicit sex stuff going on in here as well. It was really good in terms of the portrayal of a trans main character, because Juno Dawson is trans herself, and I loved the discussion that that encourages, but I imagine it can also be quite on the nose if you are somebody who is experiencing transphobia, because it delved into a lot of questions. There was literally one chapter of Alice walking into a bathroom and there was 2 pages of questions that she experienced, and she's like, can I just go to the bathroom? So it was amazing in terms of thematic content, and I loved Juno Dawson's writing style. I loved how she tied in her other books, especially Clean, which is one of my favorite books ever. But unfortunately for this, I want to give it a 3.5 stars, and that is pretty much entirely on me because I'm not a huge Alice in Wonderland person, and so I knew that I wouldn't love this book when I picked it up, and so I'm happy that I read it. I'm happy that I consumed Juno Dawson's writing because I love her writing, but it's not one that I'm probably going to hold on to, but I'm still glad I had the experience of reading it because I think she's an important voice and I'm very encouraged when reading her work. It is quite explicit with drug use as well, so if that's something that's going to upset you, then probably don't pick this up either. But yeah, 3.5 out of 5 stars. I actually finished this while I was doing my first live stream ever with Steph over on her channel, and I'm very pleased at having that memory tied with this book. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling, but I'm happy that I've read this and I'm happy that I finished it on a live stream. 3.5 stars. And then lastly, I wanted to include the audiobook that I'm currently listening to on this list. However, why am I including a book that I'm still currently reading, you might ask? It is because I have 20 minutes or less. A book just fell into me and that was scary. That's better. It is because I have 20 minutes or less of the audiobook to go. And so I'm at the very end. The climax of the story has already happened. This is just the characters regrouping after that has happened. And I feel like I'm in a good place to convey what my rating actually is. So the book I'm referring to is the Fourth Wayfarer's book, The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. I adore her. She's one of my favorite authors ever, and I will go out and buy everything that she writes. So I'm very excited for her novella coming out in July. That aside, I have decided that Record of a Spaceborne Few, the third book in this series, is my favorite, and that got a 5 stars. The others have got 4 to 4.5, and The Galaxy and the Ground Within is definitely going to be a 4.5 for me. I struggle to explain what this is going to be about because it's really about the interpersonal relationships that are built from a cultural context of all of these people and aliens coming together to experience and interact with each other. They all essentially get stuck on this planet because comms die and the satellite dies, and so they're grounded for an amount of time that they're stuck together. It's not really specified, they don't know how long it's going to be, so they're stuck on this planet. There's a host that is trying to take care of all of them because this is really like a stepping stone for all of them in their long haul journeys to get somewhere else. So they're all cut off from what they actually want to be doing, and they all interact with each other. And I loved the way that they described different experiences of culture. I think that's one of Becky Chambers' strengths, delving into the sensory aspects of writing, like what things feel like, look like, taste like, and are textured as. She's got a very good grasp of those things, and she conveys that so well through her characters. She's very intentional and careful and just very human and empathetic. And I love all of that about her character work. I think they're all done beautifully, and they're not all like nice characters. They all have their own flaws as well, but they try not to take that out on each other. And sometimes they succeed and sometimes they don't. And I love the stories that unfolds. I love the tension that arises. And a lot of this book, like 3/4 of it, were a lot of this discussion and navigating. So if you're reading a Becky Chambers book, you often don't go into it for the plot, you go into it for the interactions. And I knew that going in, but I was hoping, like Record of a Spaceborne Few, that I could give this a 5, and I just couldn't. I could give it a 4.5 though, and I was welling up with tears in certain parts just because the build up to those moments had a really excellent payoff. But as far as the book goes, it was really enjoyable, it was really nuanced, it had a plot to it in the background that I really appreciated, but I did want the first chunks of it to go a little bit faster. And because there were a bunch of different perspectives, it took me a while to get them accustomed in my head, especially because not all of them, actually none of them, are human. So not just getting their characterization into my head, but getting their physicality into my head. And that only happened after I'd seen them from other people's perspectives. But I did really like this book. I gave it a 4.5, like I said, and Becky Chambers still remains one of my favorite authors. So not a bad end to the month of February, even though I technically haven't finished this, and this is the start of March that I'm filming it. It doesn't matter. I'll finish it after I finish filming for today. So that is the last book that is in this wrap up. However, I'm currently reading something. You guessed it, I'm still making my way through the second Wheel of Time book. I put this in my March TBR, so go over and check that out if you're interested. I am now 190 pages into this and it's like 700 pages. So hopefully I can make more time to read this because I have a fairly ambitious March to be read pile. So without further ado, that is the end of this reading wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know how many books you read in February. I would love to hear, whether it's 1 or 50. I honestly love hearing about it because we all read so differently. But again, thank you for watching. I'll chat to you down in the comments and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.